So good afternoon, everyone. This is Peter Clark from Theradex, and this training is for specimen tracking with a focus on the receiving lab sites and what they would need to do once specimens arrive there. And this call is being recorded for future review and reference. In this call, I'm going to be demonstrating the specimen tracking process in Protocol 10,231, but the process that the labs will go through is identical from one protocol to the next. So I know that on this call we've got representatives from MOCA and some representatives from Johns Hopkins. And Hopkins staff is probably more interested in 10,076, but as I said, the process you'll follow will be identical to what is displayed today in this call. So let me share my screen and we'll get underway. So right now you're seeing my iMedidata home screen, and everybody that has access to RAVE will land on a screen like this. As you can see on my screen, I've got 525 studies here. You will not have nearly that many, but we will assign you access to every study that you need to track with the specimens. In order to get to a certain study, you would search in this study box, and 10,231 is what we're going to utilize for the training today. And I also want to encourage you at any point in time, if you have a question, to ask it. Don't wait until the end, because whatever question you ask will probably be helpful to somebody viewing this recording in the future. So at the 10,231 search list here, I've got 3 different environments. You'll only be seeing one at your end unless you've been given access to the UAT. And you also only probably just see the RAVE EDC link. So that would be the link to click on in order to get into RAVE. We're not going to go into production of 10,231 today. There's no sites yet, and we're just beginning that study. But I do have things set up in the UAT environment, so I'll click on RAVE EDC over here. The first thing that it displays for me is a row selection drop-down, and I've got all of the different possible roles. Most of you will probably just have the biorepository role, though it's possible that you might have been granted a different role if you had access during UAT. So if you only have one role, then you won't need to choose anything from this list. It won't even appear. I'm choosing the biorepository role. That role is the one that's applicable to all the labs, whether they're the biorepository or the MOCA lab or the Johns Hopkins lab or any other lab that might be engaged in receiving and processing specimens. So up in the right-hand corner, you can see the role that you're logged in as. As a biorepository role user, you have access to all of the different sites that have been activated for any given protocol. The other role that's used extensively for specimen tracking is a site-based role. CRA specimen tracking is its name. And all of the different site users that submit specimen data will be using that role. And there's different views that will come about depending on which role you have. One main difference is that the sites only see their own. They don't see any of the other sites involved in a protocol. So as a biospecimen as a biorepository user, I do have access to the different reports that have been set up for specimen tracking. Both of these are really important for reference, the shipping list report and the specimen labels. We will likely be expanding the different label reports in the near future, and it's possible that there could be additional versions of the shipping list report. Right now we just have 2 that are listed here in the reports panel that is right here at the home page for this protocol. So each one of these sites has been used as part of the UAT testing, and some of them are sites relevant to this particular study, some are not. Obviously, in the production environment, you're only going to see active sites that have joined in. So I'm going to pick this Aurora West Alice Medical Center. And when I go into the site, it shows me all of the different patients that have been added during UAT. And of course, when you go in, you'll see all of the live patients that are there in the production environment. In order to navigate in to look at data, you would click on the protocol, the patient of interest. So let's take a look at patient 60. When we're in RAVE with this biorepository role, we're only going to see the folders and forms that are relevant to the needs of the lab. And in some protocols at the site, the CRA specimen tracking role might see a whole list of many, many other forms here, and in other protocols it might be a shorter list. But whatever they see, they're going to be seeing all of the different forms that they'll enter data into, while you're only going to see the forms that are relevant to specimen processing.
So, Peter, this is Michelle Rudek at Hopkins.
Yes, Michelle.
So right now, I guess I have a client administrator role with read-only access. So in the case of pharmacokinetics, we not only need the specimen part, but also the dose administration time, which seems to be in a separate tab. So is that something that you would customize for a lab like ours, or is that something that we would still need a client administrator role to be able to see the dosing time? Because together those 2 modules make up what we have to do with the data.
Yes. So, Michelle, if we could do it either way, and it's something that, we should probably discuss what you think would be most valuable. We could customize for that particular study that you're referring to the biorepository role so that you can see those PK data points. Or we could just continue allowing you to have the read-only all sites access. Is that what you've got right now?
Yeah, I have the read-only all sites, so yeah. I can tell for everybody on trial for all the trials that we're involved with.
Right. So that read-only all sites allows you to see all of the data, and as long as the study PI is fine with that, we would just go with that as your way of getting the data you need. Some PIs are particular about certain clinical data not being shared with the lab, and but I can only assume that the PI has okayed your full access to that read-only all sites, because that role is one that we assign when the PI sends in a form listing study-wide access.
Okay. I just wanted to throw that out there for future, for others.
Indeed, yeah. And it may be that we need to add PK forms as a standard set of forms that are accessible for the biorepository role, if it seems like that's going to be a big part of every study that has specimen tracking. From your point of view, Michelle, do you see that that's the case across multiple protocols?
What's the case? The fact that
you need to know about the PK time points.
Yeah, we need to know the time that the specimen is drawn, so that would be probably in the biorepository role, but we need to know when the dose was administered to make sense of when the specimen was drawn relative to that time of the dose.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm taking note of this and.
Sorry. Yeah, but that would be for all PK, definitely.
Yeah. So Diane and I will get back to you on that. But it sounds like for now you've got the read-only all sites role. You should be fine. So looking in then at a particular patient, the folders that we see here, I want to visit each one of them. The enrollment folder has all of the different demographics, has the histology and disease form, and this is a kind of a reference folder. And in other words, nothing in this folder is something that you need to modify or can modify with the biorepository role. And I can't pretend to know if you need all of these data points or not, but Percy Ivy thought that this would be a relevant set of data points that labs would all need to be able to access. And the histology and disease form will contain possibly some reports that you might need to reference. These reports, by our standard operating procedures, are supposed to be printed out and included in the box when a site ships specimens. However, if a specimen is being shipped to the biorepository and then on to, say, the MOCA lab, I'm not sure if the biorepository will comply with including hard copy reports. And it's really going to be dependent upon each protocol in terms of what might be needed. And Michelle, at your lab, are you receiving or have you received any hard copy reports with specimens as of yet?
I don't think we have, to be honest. Avelina is looking at me with a scrunched up face, so I think that answer would be no.
Okay. So, and that brings up a good point that even though it's clearly spelled out in the protocol that hard copy reports should go in the box, it doesn't always happen because the sites get busy and they may feel like they've done their main duty by getting the specimens properly in the box. And this is why we wanted to make sure you would all have access to RAVE and would be able to check on the data that's entered in there. For example, pathology reports and other reports that might be relevant. So by our standard form, we always have a pathology report in this histology and disease form, and we now also always have space for up to 4 different molecular reports. And certain other protocols include a surgery report or a radiology report, sometimes other specific reports that might be added. But the main thing is that all of these reports available on this form are general summary reports. They relate to the patient, not to one particular specimen. And so once they're here, each one of the reports would be a hot link that anybody with access to this page can download. So just by clicking on the link, it's going to download to your downloads folder. And I'm using Google Chrome, and the way that browser is set up, is that I see the downloads at the bottom of the screen, and if I click on one of them, it will allow me to open it up directly without having to go to that folder. So I'm just going to click OK, and it immediately opens it up for me. And here is just a sample pathology report that I found on the internet when I searched for example pathology reports. So you can choose to print it out if you need to, or you can just look at it on the screen, however you would like to operate. And if there were other reports loaded in here, you would see the hot links right on the screen, just like we see for this pathology report. Any questions about this?
Peter, this is Sean from MoCA. Is anything editable? Can you edit anything? It looks like the pathology reports or the molecular report might be uploaded. Is that the case?
Yes. I mean, wherever there's a little pencil icon that doesn't have a line through it means that it is editable. And I'm not sure if that was intended or just accidental that these remain editable. Do you find that it would be a useful thing for you guys to be able to upload reports here, or do you think that maybe we should just turn off the editing for these fields?
I would turn it off.
Pathology report. I'm sorry, if there's an amended pathology report or some additional information that needs to be included, who would be the one responsible for that?
If there's something that's missing, or if it's simply the wrong file, Theradex's job is to review these reports as part of our data monitoring task. And so we would have a member of Diana Vuli's team reviewing what's been uploaded, and also, of course, checking to make sure that any private information has been redacted. If you guys notice something or you think that you're not getting what you need, then you would want to send an email to Diana, and she would, if it has slipped through the cracks, so to speak, she would then work with the site to make sure that they uploaded the report that was proper.
Okay. Yeah, because, you know, we've had rare instances, but we've had some instances before where we needed amended pathology reports or information that hadn't come in the original one to be appended to it. But if that's something that Diana would be the one responsible for, then I think the answer to the question is probably none of us should have access to that edit function.
This one is a molecular report.
So that's a different, that's a different question.
Yes, nobody should have edit functions or edit options to anybody else's report, much less their own. So I would say please remove that capability.
Yes, I will make sure that happens. And,
for a signed clinical for a clinical report to be amended or edited, if it's already been signed, it has to be done as an amended report. So it's a completely separate document. You can't go back in and just edit it and change it.
So I'm just making a quick note here, Patty, so that I make sure that this gets changed. Note also on this screen that this is where the site has entered the SNOMED disease term and code. This gets derived into some other places. This is a long search list of over 1,000 different SNOMED terms and codes. So there's no free text entry here. It's all chosen from a list. And the last thing I'll show you in this particular folder is on the administrative enrollment form. And this form and the enrollment form are both completed as in an automated way from the registration of the patient in OPEN, and the data flows from OPEN to IWRS and then straight into RAVE. And it's IWRS, which is the Theradex interactive web response system, that will assign and keep track of the universal patient ID. So every patient in every protocol that Theradex is involved with for specimen tracking has two different identifiers. The treatment patient ID includes the CTEP identifier for the site. So WI-108 is the CTEP identifier for Aurora West Alice Medical Center. And then the accession number, this indicates that this might have been the 60th patient. I say might because we're in UAT and any patient number might have been added. But in production, this would indicate that this is the 60th patient who has joined the study. The universal patient ID is not study specific. If the same person joins another study, they'll have the same universal patient ID. So both of them are not going to identify any private details about the person, and they're used for different things. This ID, you can be assured that it will always follow the patient everywhere, while this ID is more specific to the particular protocol that we're in. In the baseline folder, you'll find only data on prior therapies. And the first one is this prior treatment summary form. And so it's just going to give you a whole listing of whether there was any prior therapy performed that the patient had and the date of the last dose when it happened. Each one of these that are a yes will correspond to a record within these other supplemental forms. So the prior therapy supplement is going to have chemos, hormone, immunotherapy, bone marrow, gene transfer, antiretroviral, antisense, oncolytic, vaccine. All of these fall under the prior therapy supplement. We have a special supplement just for surgeries. We have one line item here for surgery, and we also have one for radiation, and we've got 3 different radiation line items here. So if I take a look at this prior therapy supplement, I'm going to see details about the chemo and the vaccine that that patient received, the start date of it, the last dose date, schedule, total dose, etc. So again, this is going to be reference that you might need in order to determine the testing procedure for the specimen, and you have access to view these records. Prior surgery, prior radiation. And then finally, we get to the All Specimens folder. And essentially, all the specimen data is stored within this folder. You'll see beneath it there's a hidden labels file. That one is not really needed for you to view. It has to do with the generation of labels. We could not come up with a way to actually hide this form from users and for it to still work the way it's supposed to. So we simply named it hidden labels to indicate you don't really need to delve into it. It's perfectly fine if you want to. It simply shows some of the data that would be printed on labels when those labels are printed. In the All Specimens folder, the very first form that you come to will be this specimen use consent form. And it's a running log that allows a patient to continually give consent for their specimen being stored, being used, being analyzed. And I believe when we're allowed to look in at this, right? So I click that edit pencil in order to see the details, but each one of these line items has the edit pencil crossed off. So you can see the exact language that the patient has agreed to. So this form could be modified from one protocol to the next if there's certain needs in a protocol to gain a certain type of consent. But the questions you see here are the standard ones that we're intending to use for all ETCTN protocols. One of the questions does refer to CLIA sequencing, given that that's a fairly standard process that CTEP is wanting to have for all ETCTN patients whenever possible. So we can look at these. We can't modify the questions. They're all here. And if there's a no answered for one of these, then there would be a reason entered, a reason for the withdrawal of the consent. Just because one of these is answered no doesn't mean that the patient's pulling out of all specimen analysis. It just means that something may have changed in their view of how they would like to participate. The next form that I would like to highlight is the specimen tracking enrollment form. And here is the place that all specimens start out. And if the patient has 15 different specimens that have been taken and sent in, you're going to see 15 different log lines in this form. This form also has some uploaded reports. These would be reports that are directly connected to the specimen that was taken. So if there was some pathology or molecular report that's relevant directly to that specimen, it will be uploaded here. And any place that we have reports that have been uploaded, we always have this statement about redaction of personal information. And again, part of Theradex's job is to check to make sure that indeed all of that protected data has been redacted from these reports.
Peter, this is Sean. The numbers 1 on the end there, what are those referred to after the reports to the far right?
Okay. Yes, these numbers, and we can click on this to see in the portrait mode here, these have to do with some of the internal workings of the custom functions that derive data from this form to others. And we found that if we hid them from the end user, then the custom functions didn't work. So we had to include them on the screen. And even though perhaps it's a little confusing, but there's no labels for these fields, as you may have noticed, Sean, when you were playing around in UAT.
Yep. Okay. So leave them alone. Don't worry about them.
Yes, that's right. And, you know, all of these fields are not editable. And here's an example of a report that you can't upload, unlike those in the histology and disease that I need to make sure get corrected. But here again, if I click on this link, it's going to download, and when I click on it, it opens up in the application that I designated for viewing reports. So here, there is some personal data that was redacted. Anything that looks like a medical record number, a name, even patient initials, email addresses, home addresses, Social Security numbers. These all must be redacted, and so you would not expect to see them. However, identifying numbers like the patient ID, the universal patient ID, the specimen number, a block number, a surgical path number, all of these could be on here, and indeed we encourage sites to put a spare specimen label on the report so that it very clearly is associated with the particular specimen.
That's a patient name on
Yeah. I think we all noticed that.
What's that?
It has a patient name on it. Nancy Doddard?
Yeah, that was that needed to have been redacted. And again, this is a sample that I picked up off of the internet, and I didn't see those. And there's two instances here now where I see the patient's name, but these places, I believe, have the patient name or in this case, the offspring of the patient. And so this was an example of where not everything was correctly redacted.
That's all right. Examples of what not to do are just as good.
Yeah.
So it's okay to leave the date of birth on? I'm sorry, I guess maybe that's a dumb question, but I thought any PHI and identifying PHI should be redacted. And I thought,
well, it is okay because we collect it as part of our enrollment process. And it's been something that CTEP has always agreed was acceptable for Theradex to collect. And to be specific, when we look at the enrollment folder and the form here, the patient's date of birth is listed. Let's see, here it is, date of birth.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and Chris, you can have date of birth on a clinical report as long as it doesn't correlate. You can't correlate that to a specific individual. You're okay. So you can have a name and you can't have a name, but if you have just the internal number plus a date of birth, nobody's going to be able to figure that out unless they go back and try to get the census information for everybody who was born on that day. So that's pretty impractical.
And I mean, it's not to say that maybe the FBI could find out who this is, but I think for our research purposes, we're safe in saying that with this demographic information, we're not going to be able to identify the patient.
Hey, Peter, so if you go back to the previous screen, I noticed a typo. If you're
on which screen? The specimen tracking or in the enrollment?
Yeah, right there. I think you've got what do they call that, a homophone? So ensure should be ensure with an E in the yellow highlighted thing.
Ah, okay. Well, better get that corrected. I think this language is all over the place in our many protocols.
Yeah, Dave, we're going to sign you up for QA.
This is what you would expect from a wannabe computer scientist, right? That level of precision is what I should be known for.
All right. Well, I've made note of it, and we'll make sure that's corrected. So here, this is always a good place to go to get the essential data on the specimen, but to get the detailed data, you need to go into the particular folder. So here, the log lines are identified by a number, and that number corresponds to the order in which the data entry was done, not necessarily the order that the specimen was collected. And this log line number 1 will correspond to this folder that's got the 1 in the parentheses. So you can always easily correlate the specimen data that's on the log line with these different separate folders. So if you had 15 log lines here, you're going to see 15 folders, one folder for each specimen in this panel on the left. So if we take a look at this, we know that some data entry was done here. It's saying that the specimen was collected on the 1st of March, 2019, and it's an FFPE core. When I click on that folder, it shows me the details. Here we can see some data that's been derived or calculated in from other forms. So everything in this top section, and it's not there, I can highlight, everything in this top section is coming in from somewhere else. The specimen ID is always going to be on this third line, and the first line always is going to tell you the log line that the specimen was originally entered on. Oftentimes, there's going to be a correlation between the order entered and the order collected, but it's not guaranteed. So here you can see that not every field has been completed because certain fields are not relevant to certain specimens. With this FFPE core, we have no need to enter the collection tube type, since that's for liquid specimens only, or information on the slide prep type or the number of charged or uncharged slides. We are going to see the number of specimens collected and the number of aliquots if there was some processing done. Even just placing a specimen in formalin is considered processing, so we would expect to see a number here for formalin fixed specimens that have been placed into formalin. There's always going to be, if there's some processing done, a date and a time that the specimen was placed into formalin in this case. And then we have the type of tissue. This is derived in from that enrollment form, specimen tracking enrollment, and the site from which the specimen was taken. This form is important because it contains some fields that labs would need to fill out. So whether it's Michelle's lab at Hopkins or the MOCA lab or even the biorepository, the lab personnel has access to this set of the form, right? So when I click on this edit pencil, these are live fields that can be completed. And the first one is the processing lab. So each protocol will have a different set of labs that are relevant. For a protocol that Michelle's lab is at, she would see her lab listed here. For 10,231, we just have the biorepository and the MOCA lab. Sample analysis comes from the protocol document itself as what is expected. So these different processes or analyses would be applied. And so somebody at the MOCA lab would need to come in and enter this more specific data of what's happened to the specimen after it arrived at the MOCA lab or at whatever lab has received that specimen. And so all we're interested here in is the exact analysis that was done and then the date and the time of the analysis. So perhaps this was done a couple days ago.
So Peter, I have a question. This is Vishnu. I have a question. This can be pushed by API too, right? I think that's what we talked about before.
Yes, that is in the plan issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We don't have it yet, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Patty. Is it necessary to have a time of analysis? The sequencing assays take a couple of days to be done, and if we have to keep track of, we don't consider the analysis complete until the report is complete. So how
Patty,
is that to be handled?
Just leave it blank. So
just leave it blank. Okay.
Yeah. So the time field is there in case it is needed, but it's not required.
Okay, great.
And Peter, this is Michelle Rudek, and I guess this is something that, we've developed in our own database that we use on site that isn't linked. But in our case, we're running potentially 40 to plus samples at one time in one assay. So more than likely one patient's worth of samples are analyzed on the same date. So are we going to have to go in and for every single time point do this? Or can this be, again, like a batch function where we could select that like all samples and then tweak for maybe one sample had to be repeated and was reported on a different day? It's something that maybe we can take offline and figure out, but I think for a PK lab that's running hundreds of samples per trial, it might get cumbersome to hand type in for every.
Agreed. I do agree with you, and I think it's good for us to have a discussion offline, whether it's some kind of an API process where you might have some maybe spreadsheet or something that is uploaded and then processed by automation, or some batch process that works with the forms here. That's something we'll discuss and figure out what would work best. So I want to show you then. Yes.
Say we made a mistake with Oncomine, and it was actually whole exome sequencing. What recourse do we have? Can we go back and edit that?
Yep. So you just click that edit pencil, and again, you click the edit pencil for the analysis description, and then you can choose something different. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Very good. And anytime you change data, Rave is going to put a little triangle there just so that anybody looking at it will know that there's some history of something previous. And by clicking on this check mark, anybody can reference the audit trail. So when I go to sample analysis, it shows the history. Originally, I had entered Oncomine, and then I changed it to whole exome sequencing.
Peter, this is Patty. I have a stupid question about the page you're showing now. I may not be seeing it, but is there a line for the date the specimen was received? I see a date that was processed and that it was collected, but I'm looking for date it was received. Is that under shipping, your shipping status?
Yep, that's where I was going next, Patty. So
okay.
So it wasn't a stupid question at all. It was a leading question. So we'll lead right into the shipping status form. And the specimen ID is right at the top of the form so that you know what specimen you're talking about. You can always see the subject ID also at the left at the top of the form, and it's also in the tab structure at the top. And this log line is something that's completely active and ready for anybody who's got the biorepository role. So if a lab receives a specimen and processes it, it could well be that they're going to then send some part of that on to somebody else. And so you might need to add a log line here to indicate that you're going to ship something out. But first, let's take a look at what was sent to you. And so here, when I edit this, I can see the history, the shipment tracking number, the shipper, who sent it, contact information, both the telephone number, and there's also a place for the shipping email address. But there are certain fields that need to be entered by the lab itself, and they all are listed here at the bottom. So this site or the lab that shipped it to this receiver is sending 5 different containers for this specimen. And we need to know how were they received. And so each one of these fields would need to be entered. So this first one, receiving condition, if it came the way it was shipped, all right, and so here the sender sent it with an ambient pack to make sure that the temperature didn't deviate from room temperature. And so if it arrived in that way and everything looked good, well, then the answer is simply same as shipping. And if, however, something is radically different, maybe it was sent in dry ice and the dry ice melted, or the package broke apart and somehow the ice was removed, so then you would choose other and describe in this other specify box what happened. So maybe it'll be something like boxes damaged and some shipping material lost.
Peter, is there a limit on the text size for that?
There's probably some, I can't remember right now, but let's just see how much we can copy in here. So there's quite a bit of space. There's always going to be some limit. So in Chrome, whenever you see this little handle at the bottom of a text box, that just means that you can change the size of it to whatever you need. It doesn't always work in other browsers, but we like to emphasize that Chrome works well with this. And so then we have a received date. That's what Patty was getting after. When was this specimen received? And let's hope it was received the next day. Number of samples in good condition. And so again, if for some reason one of the containers was damaged, then we would say that there was only 4 containers received in good condition, whatever those containers might be. And finally, there's a judgment here about, is the specimen adequate? So some of this is more of a taking a look to see, are you expecting to receive FFPE block, 5 different formalin fixed containers of it, or not? So if everything is looking right, then we would say yes. And there's a note here that it's for the receiving lab only. But if it's not as expected, then we have a drop-down list here. It could be that the specimen was not labeled or incorrectly labeled, or there was a missing ID, or the specimen was not in formalin when it was supposed to be, or it was not frozen and it was supposed to be. Maybe the quantity or the quality is not sufficient. Some of these are definitely judgments that might require some testing, specifically the quality option here. But these are the different choices that the Nationwide Children's Hospital Biorepository thought would be appropriate to have in this list. And we do have an other specify so that there's always a place to put in something specific. And of course, this would be a no, it's not adequate kind of answer if we had some reason. So if the specimen needs to get sent from your lab to some other place, then you would be filling out a new log line to send the specimen. We've got FedEx, UPS, USPS, and local or hand-carried as options. And the local or hand-carried is used for some studies if there's a lab that's right there at the treating hospital. So you would fill out all of these different fields as need be. It could even be that you're sending it back to the site if for some reason the consent was withdrawn and the site requested that whatever specimen material you had needed to be returned. So in the destination drop-down, there's always going to be the initial labs that the protocols are set up for, and then the site that the specimen came from, so that you can return it to them specifically. And I want to just jump
Peter,
quickly. Yes.
This is Patty. I hate to interrupt you. I'm going to have to drop off. We have another, and a couple other people might have to drop off too. We have another phone call scheduled at 3 o'clock. Can you please send us all how to get to the recording of this?
Yes, I will, Patty.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been very helpful so far.
You're welcome, Patty.
Okay.
Hey, Peter?
Yes.
Hey, it's Wayne in Win June.
Wayne, we're just finishing up a call, and I'll be with you shortly.
That's fine. You want me to call me back, or?
Sure, I'll message you.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Bye.
so I'll come back.
So I have another meeting as well right now, but I just want to quickly finish this so that we have it on record. And would anybody like to see me fill out this form? Would that be helpful?
I think it's self-explanatory.
Very good. So I'm just going to cancel out of this form for now, and I want to show these other two forms very briefly. This pathology verification and assessment form was designed originally just for MOCA, but CTAP is thinking that it could be used by other labs as well. And so even though it's called the MOCA biopsy pathology verification and assessment form, we've got a note here indicating that it might be completed by other groups. It contains some derived data about the specimen, specimen ID, the biopsy site, and the date it was collected. And then there's fields that the MOCA folks will be quite familiar with now, where we can enter diagnosis and the pathologist's review of whether the sample is, whether the diagnosis is accurate, and then there's a sample assessment. So this is kind of more detailed assessment that involves there having been some analysis done. And so we have a yes or no question here. Is sample suitable for analysis? Hopefully.
Sorry,
yeah.
what does that mean exactly? Suitable for nucleic acid analysis, sequencing analysis?
It's, yes. So it would be suitable for whatever analysis is being performed. This form is kind of designed mostly for nucleic acid analysis, and but I can't pretend to know the details of whether we would need to change some of this if it was some other type of analysis.
Downstream analysis, I guess. Yeah.
This was a non-developing this for the Oncomine. This was very specific for the pilot project.
Okay.
That was the intended use.
The other thing I would like to point out is all these things will be done by biorepository pathologists and not the MOCA pathologist.
Yes, and originally it was going to be done at MOCA, but I believe you know you're right. Is that DJ? or Bishu, but anyway, okay. Sorry, Bishu. So MOCA, the biorepository at Nationwide will be filling out this form, and hence we did put this big note up here. So they will be making the judgment whether it's suitable or not, and perhaps doing some enrichment in order to make the specimen more viable, and then the form gets saved. So finally, this Oncomine results form is still under development. Right now, it does have this upload field at the bottom, and this is the way that the Oncomine report will be sent back to the sites via an upload here. So, Patty, you or your staff would need to upload those reports in this form. And right now, don't worry about the data fields, and we're going to be updating this soon. But the report itself that would eventually go back to the site PI and the patient, if appropriate, would be uploaded here from MOCA. And to upload any report, you just simply click on the Choose File. You would then navigate through your computer to find the scanned image of the report, and however you need to navigate to find it. And once you find the report, you would select it. So I don't have an Oncomine example report, so anything that I choose wouldn't be entirely accurate. But if I just pick this sample pathology report and click on Open here, it's going to then upload as soon as I click the Save button.
So Peter, just to be clear, will we have to fill that gene, ID code, variant, allele frequency, and all that information? The CSV file.
Yeah, none of these fields need to be completed in data entry mode. We're working on and this is something I think Dave had mentioned earlier in the call. So we're working on an API that will allow this data to flow in from MOCA into the RAVE database.
Okay. So Peter, real quick, can you show that the file has been uploaded for Patty's sake of knowing that we've confirmed that it's been uploaded at this particular time?
Right. So right here we can see it hasn't been uploaded because it's not a live link. And when I click on the Save button, it uploads the file, and we have this blue live link that anybody who has access to this page could download onto their computer. So Patty, that's right, Patty's not on the call at this point. But so when Patty sees this, she'll know that when she sees this blue link, that indicates that the file has successfully been loaded into RAVE.
And then there's the timestamp over there in the lower left as well.
Well, that's a timestamp of every moment. If you want to know the timestamp of the upload, you check the audit report, and here the user entered, right? So we've got the time and the date right here.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
So Peter, I have a question. Since you are working on the API, when you receive the sample, remember, like the receiving lab is putting it whether it's acceptable and all these things. I also remember that you are working with Nationwide on a barcoding system, so you can scan the barcode, and then if we can go directly to the sample page that way, so that people don't have to type in and search for that specific sample, you can just have the process quickly done. Is that something you're still working on, or? I remember. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
the phone call that I have coming up here is all about that.
Okay.
So we're still working on it, and eventually the samples will have barcodes on them.
That's the sample label part, right? Yeah.
Okay, that'd be good, actually.
So, and just the last thing here, if you go back out to the site and you go to the shipping list, you'll have the tracking number it will have arrived in an email. And so I happen to know this is the tracking number we were just looking at. When I click this submit report, it generates that shipping list. It should have been a hard copy in the box, but you can always refer to it right in the Rave environment. So it takes for sometimes 10 seconds to generate.
Peter, then the main point I would like to mention is we got the sample for one of the studies where we need to upload the data on Rave, right? Impact, bill facts for impact, but 10076, right? And none of us have account on Rave yet. So I don't know how we're gonna.
Do you want to ask the question, Corinne? So, Peter, this training people just did. When you first log on after you give access to Rave, you have to still take the online training, or we are done?
There may be a short, like 45-minute,
short,
orientation to Rave training that you have to take.
Yeah, I did that actually, so that's why I was asking, like Corinne and Chris was. I think you're thinking like to get it done.
I need to do it. Yeah, yeah.
You should have a
once
you've does the training.
Once you've done that training, it follows you to any protocol.
Yeah.
But
so,
Peter, I don't know if you got my question, but none of us in Mocha has access to Rave yet, and we have a sample in here.
Well, I will make sure that this afternoon you get access.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And I will send out few of those studies which we need access to. Is that okay, Peter?
That's fine. That would be helpful.
I think most of us who did the training now should get the access.
You'll get access. Take that 45-minute training. Yeah.
Everybody who's been on this call will get the access you need. And so if you think that I need to know the protocols that you want, then please email me.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
Right.
I know you have another meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.